Welcome to the first video that I've ever made called See the Knot. So for some reason I find myself all of a sudden really interested in learning about knots. And I love all the apps that you find, and I love the YouTube videos because they show you step by step exactly what to do, where to hold your hand, how to fold the rope. They walk you through each of the steps, and by doing that you can learn the knots. My purpose here is not to do a better job than that. My purpose is to try to show you how some of these knots link together in a way that it might be easier to learn as you're watching those apps. And so this first video is going to be about the overhand knot. And I'm choosing the overhand knot because it's such a simple knot. If you ask anybody, show me a knot, a lot of people will start by just folding over the rope, pulling it through, and they've got the overhand knot. But there are so many variants of that that you'll learn. So some obvious ones. So if you start with an overhand knot, and then so that's one overhand knot, and then you make another one, you go through again, and you pull that, you've got a stopper knot called a double overhand knot. Now again, I'm going fast because I'm not trying to show you how to do them. I'm just trying to show you how they link together. So you also might think about something as simple as fold it over, and then instead of pulling the end through, pull a loop through, or a bite, and you get a slip knot. So these are easy ones. So now let's get a little more complicated. So hopefully you can see this. So if I take this and I wrap it around like that, I'm going to go this way, wrap it around like this, and now I make an overhand knot. We actually call this a hitch, even though it's an overhand knot, because it's now hitched to this piece of wood. Some people call this a hitch, some people call it a half hitch. So that is just an overhand knot attached to this piece of wood. Now supposing I did the same thing, I made that overhand knot or a hitch, and then I came outside the rope and I made another overhand knot by going through, and I pulled that up. They call that two half hitches. So now if I do the same thing, I go one overhand knot. Now remember the double overhand knot we did before. So if I make a double overhand knot, which is just by going around again, and then I come outside the rope and I make another overhand knot, and if I were to cinch that all up together, that is called a taut line hitch. It's used to attach a tent to a stake usually. And there are lots of other variants of this. So like here's another one. If I start with an overhand knot, and then a few seconds ago when I went through it again, I put the second loop that way. If I put the second loop that way, so I go around this side, right? And then I come around and make you can see that, make my other overhand knot, and I pulled that up. Again, I'm not going to tighten everything here because I'm moving quickly. People call that a midshipman's hitch. Sometimes the names are a little bit different. There's different variants of it, but that's the general idea. So there's some more overhand knot things that are related to overhand knots, and they're just one overhand knot after another. So let's go back to this. So you probably know or have heard of one of the most common knots is the bowline. So the way you learn the bowline is, you make something that looks like a hole, and the rabbit comes out of the hole, they say, goes around its tree, and then runs back into the hole, right? That is the bowline knot. Right, the bowline knot. Okay, I'm not tightening at all. But if you think about it, all you've really done here is made an overhand knot. So the rabbit comes out of the hole is an overhand knot, and then it just goes around the standing end and back in the hole, back in the hole, and then when you tighten, you've got the bowline knot. Just a variant of an overhand knot. Now you also may have heard of a reef knot or a square knot, usually done with 2 ropes. I'm doing it here with 1. And the reef knot is usually, you remember, as right over left, left over right. That's how you remember it. There's the reef knot or square knot. Well, again, all you've really done when you go right over left and tuck under, you've made an overhand knot. And when you go the other way, you made another overhand knot. So it's really just 2 overhand knots. So that is the square knot. Okay, so now if I go back to this and I start my overhand knot, but instead of going in, I go under. It looks like an 8, and that's what they call it. So then when you go through and pull, that is a figure 8 knot. Looks a little like an overhand knot with that extra twist. Now I'm not going to talk about this knot right now, but if you instead put this end into this hole and then came up this hole, it would create another kind of knot, which we're going to come back to in a minute, but I don't want to talk about it now. I just wanted to flag it for you so you know it's coming. By the way, if you did this and you made another twist and went through there, you would get something called a stevedore knot. Okay, so now I'm going to take another rope. I'm sorry, they're both white, so it's a little hard to see. But again, if you take both ropes and you make an overhand knot, come around and through, you've now made a European death knot, or a Euro death knot. And then, if instead of doing that, I took this rope and I took this rope and I made an overhand knot. I'm going to leave it really wide, like that. And I took this other rope and I retraced this rope. So I'm coming around, just retraced it, right? And I went under and I pulled. I would now have something called a water knot. It's just an overhand knot that's traced through with another rope. Okay, now I'm going to get to the last couple knots. So the last couple knots are, you may have heard of a way of tying 2 ropes together called a fisherman's knot. So what you do is, they say you take this rope, you make an X with it, right? And then you come through, and that is a fisherman's knot, they say. And then you do the same thing on the other side with this rope. But if you think about it, all you really just did there was you made an overhand knot. So that is just an overhand knot tied around this other rope. Now this last one is a little more complicated, but if I did the same thing, I came around, and then instead of going through, I went around again. Right? And I went around and I went through both ropes. They call that a double fisherman. And again, you did the same thing on the other side. Now here is the interesting thing. I want to show you what that really looks like. So I'm going to pull this other rope out so you can see it. And then I'm going to unfold this. And hopefully, just make it a little bit bigger. Hopefully, this will, even though it looks complicated, look familiar because we looked at it a couple minutes ago. If I pull this end out temporarily, remember it went in that way, and I pull it out from here, remember which way it came in, what you see is it's really a figure 8 knot, and then this end goes up here and through here. And that is really what that double fisherman is. So anyway, I think that's probably enough now. I think we went through, I don't know, 13 or 14 knots. It's enough for this video. And again, the point of me doing these videos is to, is to try to help you learn the knots faster by just seeing how they link together and realize that they're all similar. And if people like this video, I'll make others, and I really hope other people will upload videos that or comment on ways to actually see knots that are not just around directions as to what to do with your hands, but ways to link them together so that you understand what you're doing. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.